Welcome back to the Memory Jogger podcast with Jason and Wyatt. This is Jason, and he is obviously Wyatt.
I think so. I don't know anymore. It's been so long, and us getting up to in the years. Sometimes things can be forgetful, even our names.
Not quite yet. I think we're safe for a few more years. But anyway, we want to thank everyone for joining us once again as we attempt to jog our memories and run down a few childhood dreams. And we hope our conversation will maybe stir up a few memories of your own as well. So, Wyatt, after our special Road Trip to 40 episode, we are finally here to talk about the topic that I chose last time, which we actually had both been thinking about, Nickelodeon.
Nick. Oh wait, sorry.
Nickelodeon.
There it is.
Well, we had a great childhood growing up with several shows on Nickelodeon, and I'm really anxious to kind of dive into this topic tonight and see maybe some of the early shows we remember watching, maybe a few, later on towards high school, and even Nick at Night, which was, I had it on quite often, I remember, in my high school years.
Oh, yes.
So ought to be a fun topic. We got a little bit of feedback from Twitter after throwing it out there that we were going to do this podcast a couple times, and circumstances didn't exactly work out, but we are finally back and ready to dive into Nickelodeon. Just a quick reminder on how you can listen to the show. You can find us as part of the Rediscover the 80s podcast feed on your favorite podcast app like iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. You can also find us on the Throwback Network podcast feed and also at throwbacknetwork.net. And if you want to listen to the raw audio from our recording session, you can head over to the Rediscover the 80s YouTube channel and hear all of our ands and ums and you-knows and stuff that I edit out and curse words and
Yeah. But we still catch ourselves with the us, and us being, I won't call us professional by any means, but we're not quite novice as far as
right.
broadcasters go. But it's still kind of, I do catch myself because I like to QC it first time through, and I sit there and go, I really need some lessons again, because all I do is and if memory serves me, back in our day of working the radio station, that was temptation for being fired from old Carl. Just for
Yeah,
that.
he was on you for correct pronunciation. It was Detroit, not Detroit. I got hit for that one a couple times when I'm announcing the football scores or something. But yeah, I know, like I'm doing right now. All the likes, us, kinda, or whatever.
Man, that was another sore topic right there.
Man, all of those. If I could eliminate those from my vocabulary, we do a podcast in about 20 minutes.
So. 30, because we still got to talk about stuff. But yes, right. it would definitely take a few, several minutes rather off the broadcast. I almost said off the radio station. I'm like, what? I got
this is kind of
like, my mind.
Yeah, this is kind of like our own radio station. But
yeah, minus the FCC laws and a tower that I have to climb to change a light bulb.
And professionalism, yeah, that's
yes.
That's all part of our radio station. Anyway, we want to thank everybody for tuning in and encourage you basically to go to the show notes page of our podcasts to interact with us over at rediscoverthe80s.com, or just find us on Twitter at RD80s, and you can interact with us there and tell us what you think about the show, a certain memory that maybe we touched on, just chatting and going off those bunny trails that we love to go off on. So, but speaking of Twitter, I thought we would open up actually with a little bit of Twitter feedback, if you're cool with that.
I am. Sorry.
I'm trying to make this go back and forth a little bit, so I'm just not.
No, that was my fault. I was trying to
host.
clean up my wires. My mic cables were in my way.
So we had one commenter on the actually the Throwback Network Facebook group, who is Kurt Toyster. This is one of my new favorite podcasts. He says the WPIX Channel 11 talk brought back memories. I grew up on that channel here in New Jersey. They have their own great Facebook page called WPIX Archives, where they post so many great old promos, clips, and ads. Unquote there from Kurt. Thank you for giving us that comment. And I did actually go over there and like that page. I think I actually even shared that with you, Wyatt, to go check out. I'm not sure if you did or not, but it gives a lot of those old clips.
That's an incentive because as you know, I rarely have enough time to check my Facebook anymore, so I will have to look for that notification.
Yeah, so there's a lot of good stuff over there on that WPIX archive page. So invite everybody to go check that out. At Jay Swash on Twitter says, really enjoying the Memory Jogger show. He's, as a lifelong Mask fan, Outlaw was my holy grail. The number of podcasts is intimidating. It is a little bit to us too. You know, we can pretty much talk about anything on here, and we probably will.
Yes,
but you know, it can be kind of intimidating. Where do we go next?
Right.
But usually by the end of the show, we got an idea of what we want to do. You know, for the next one, we'll throw it out there and actually have encourage you to pick Wyatt for next time.
Oh, really?
As we get towards the end of the show, yes. Not a mandate, but we have a possible opportunity to collaborate with some fellow 80s bloggers and podcasters out there. So I think it'll be a fun show to do as we get close to Christmas.
Interesting.
So we'll talk about that in a little bit. One more, the pathologist, he goes by. He's at Necrotic Doctor on Twitter. I believe we met this guy at RetroCon, if I'm not mistaken. But he says, wow, I just finished Memory Jogger episode 1 today and just now see the Halloween episode dropped. Excellent. He also tweeted me a little hugs picture.
Interesting.
When we were talking about that story for Halloween. But thank you, Mr. Pathologist, for following us and listening to those first couple episodes. And we've got some other Twitter feedback to get to once we get into the topic. But I did have also one icebreaker I wanted to throw out there at you to see if you had heard about this coming up. Actually, in about 2 weeks. The Super Mario Run app is set to hit iTunes on December 15th with a release on Android sometime, I guess, in the new year. But basically, there's different modes you can do with this new game app. The main one will be kind of like this endless runner type scroller. I don't know if you ever played like Temple Run, or there's a Minions app that my boys play where you're kind of running down a street. But this one is going to be obviously, yeah, this one is actually going to be side scrolling like the original Super Mario Brothers, and they'll have some other little racing, I guess, type stuff and ways to interact with other players. But it'll be a free app, but you can basically unlock everything for $9.99. So had you heard about this new Super Mario Brothers game?
I believe I actually had seen it on Fox News.
Uh-huh.
one of their little ads, and it was just, hey, Super Mario is running back or something. That was kind of the headline,
Hmm.
and then it actually popped up surprisingly on my iPad as an advertised app, but then it disappeared. So I thought I was seeing things. Um, so yeah, I've seen it. I don't know much about it. I haven't like you described it. I didn't know how they were going to uh, what the game would be, the scenario for it.
Hmm.
But I will probably download that in a hurry, especially if it's for free.
Yeah.
I'm cheap, so I won't be paying the $10 fee. I'll be honest.
I enjoy free apps as well, and I use what is it called? Google Opinion Rewards, something like that. I have an Android tablet, so I use that app, and you get little surveys and such, and you earn credits. And I use my credits for purchasing apps and stuff like that. Whenever I get them saved up, so I might do something like that to save up and unlock everything on this Super Mario run. But it looks really cool. If you've ever gone out to YouTube and looked at the gameplay, I don't know if they have a trailer out yet or if it was just some footage from one of the conventions that Mr. Nintendo there was at. Shoot, what's his name? Shigeki Miyamoto. Forgive me. That's Japanese is not my strong suit. But he was at, I think, an Apple event and basically was telling about the game and showed some gameplay. Basically the guy who created Mario, and he showed some gameplay. It looks just like Super Mario Brothers, but in kind of a modern 3D type look. But the gameplay looks similar, and the goal at the end of each stage is to get to the flag, and you have little, different things along the way that can prohibit you from reaching that. But I thought that was cool that they're feeding off of the retro, the original gameplay, but yet giving it a modern twist. And this being Nintendo's kind of first step into the mobile gaming world, I thought that was basically a good starting point for them. We'll see how people react to it, but I'm excited to play it. It looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm eager as well, and I am rather surprised. I would think that they would try to market themselves for having their own console and not do an Android or any type of iTunes app. So I'm really surprised. But good on them.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
nothing else, this will draw more customers. This could be the taste, to get the next Nintendo, whatever. If it's a Wii version or if it's another system that's coming down the pike.
yeah. Which they actually have. What do they call it? The NX, I think, is going to be their next console.
Oh, I haven't even heard of that one.
Uh, yeah, I think that's coming out. It might be even next year in 2017. I've seen some headlines go by. One of them was that they're trying to bring back cartridges instead of discs because the cartridges hold more data and more memory,
Well, now they do,
and
yeah.
they're obviously more dependable or not easily as scratched or broken as CDs.
Yes, but will they
So
get away with having to blow on it?
I don't know. That's kind of an urban legend. I've seen people refute that it actually helps, and it was just the positioning of the game inside the actual console. But I don't know. We still do it to this day when I, I fire up the Nintendo. Got to blow on it first and put it in.
I never blew on it first. I always blew on it when it didn't work. That's when I would actually blow on it. Now I would actually blow into the NES to maybe there's dust somewhere in one of those pins. Or the classic, someone, when my electronics teacher actually told me to something along the lines, you don't have to blow on it, but what you should do is get, and he would say specifically the cotton swab, but not. It'd have to be the surgical type, not the very loose cotton
Right.
swab that we like Q-tips. We know it, and take a dab of alcohol, rubbing alcohol, and run it over the pins inside the cartridge. He said that would cure up all your problems. I tried it once and it still never did.
Everybody's got an answer, I guess. I don't know. As long as the blowing worked, we thought it worked. So
Exactly. We thought it worked.
yeah. Well, anyway, how about we dive into the topic at hand, and I guess before we get into the actual shows we watched, we talked a little bit about our TV viewing as kids and some of the channels that we had, and I remember getting cable really early on in the 80s, and having that big ugly box on top of your dial set, that was your cable box. And I remember it was a big deal when we switched TVs, when we got a new TV, and it was push button, so you could actually punch in the channel instead of having to click it, or I think some of them had the corded remotes at that time. I don't remember ours having any kind of corded remote, but we had cable pretty early in the 80s, and I was glued to Nickelodeon and MTV and all of the those non-pay channels, I'll say. We never had HBO or the Disney Channel or anything like that, but what was your kind of early TV setup? In did you get cable early on to get channels like Nickelodeon?
I want to say that we did. I want to say we had it. It had to have been very late, like 79, 80 is when we had cable. I suspect that because I don't remember ever seeing an antenna on our TV. Our TV was an oddball, at least in that era, because it was actually a push button, but it was a push button from 2 to 13. And if you wanted anything higher, there was actually a button for UHF, and then that was a dial. So it was like it was a weird incorporation, but it worked. With that, I luckily never had the ugly cable box that you're describing until much later. We had to get one, I think, because the local cable company did an upgrade or something. But nonetheless, I know we had it because I know I could go down every single channel, and something was always on it.
Right.
At least 2 to 13. It wasn't like the classic Jeff Foxworthy, if the president's on, your night's shot because you couldn't watch Flipper.
Right.
There's only 3 channels that you could get, which was actually the case. If you did have antenna in our neck of the woods, you got 3, maybe 4, if you were lucky, and you did the. I wish I had the episode number, but if you do the Al Bundy Fox viewing position, it had to be like that to pick up one of the other stations. But
I don't recall us having. We must have had some kind of antenna hooked up to the house, but I don't remember anything off of our TVs. And for a kid like me who didn't have any siblings, when we upgraded, that meant I got the 13-inch in my room. I didn't have a cable box, but I did have the cable plugged into it, so I could watch whatever the dial went up to. I think it may have been 13 or something like that. And I had my Sega Master System plugged up to that in my room. Oh man, I had the awesome setup. I was so spoiled as a kid. So spoiled. But when we got that push button, I think it must have been like a 19-inch or something. Oh man, it was like being at the movie theater almost compared to the 13-inch,
Right.
Right. But
I didn't get my own TV for years and years. In fact, when we moved to my stepdad's, that's when I finally got one, and it was literally out of he already had a. We actually had bought a newer 19-inch TV, and he still had a 13-inch dial, and that was his everyday TV. So he said, "Hey, you want the 13-inch in your, for your room?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And then not a few years later, it went out. And in fact, I remember telling you this, Jason. I had bought a year prior. I had bought one of them 5-inch black and white hand portable type AM/FM TV.
I vaguely remember that. Yeah.
I ended up selling that actually only just a couple of years ago. Uh, but nonetheless, I had figured out a way to rig up the VCR into it because there was an external. It looked like a headphone jack, is what it looked like, but there was an external hookup a hookup for an external antenna, and I had basically jerry rigged an old headset jack to one of them. You remember those cable converters from the 2-wire,
Yeah.
or from the coax to the 2-wire. That's
Yeah.
what I rigged up, and it worked beautifully. Never had a problem. So I watched. That was what I watched it to watch the Three Stooges to basically go to sleep on. And then when you and I watched Three Stooges at your house, your mom's house, on her 19 or whatever inch TV, I swore I went to a 50-inch TV from a 5-inch. It was hilarious. But anyway, that was a bunny trail we weren't expecting.
Oh yeah, well, a little bit. I wanted to kind of set up what our experiences were like before we essentially dove into Nickelodeon, because the show's, we can be selfish. This show's about us, but it's also about our experience, relative to all these things we're going to be talking about. And a lot of people had that same kind of experience. But well, let's just dive in. What do you remember, I guess, the earliest about Nickelodeon? What shows maybe you watched, or any specific memories?
The consistent ones that I remember were Pinwheel. That was an early one for me.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that was actually an approved alternative to Sesame Street, as far as my parents were concerned. I remember it very, very vaguely. I remember seeing a YouTube, just recently, a YouTube video of the intro. And man, that tune, I still remember the song all these years before seeing that YouTube video. I still remember not every word, not that there was much of a lyrics to it, but I remember the little thing. To me, it was actually soothing.
Oh yeah, yeah.
For whatever reason, it was a very soothing, calm, just intro, and I remember it being as such. Another one that I watched was Picture Pages. I loved watching that, but me and the geeky kid in me, I liked watching it because I liked watching him use that. Basically,
use the pen. Yes.
Use the pen, the little whatever he'd do, or when he'd have, I don't know what. That's it. But when he would go to, I guess, his visual aid or whatever he did, otherwise he had that. It took me years to figure out what he was using, but basically it was a travel alarm clock, but they had remasked the face of it as a TV screen or whatever he used, and he would put something in it like it would be a modern day like thumb drive or flash drive type device. Obviously, he was just sticking probably a Lego inside the car thing, for all I know. But I remember that on the show. I remember You Can't Do That on TV. Loved that show, mainly for the sliming events. That was awesome. To this day, I still cannot figure out, because everybody has said that Alanis Morissette started there. I haven't watched it since I heard that, and I haven't watched it for years anyway. So I still can't picture who she was.
It was later on, if I do remember correctly. It was during maybe the last couple seasons that she was on there.
Oh,
so it wasn't any of the kids from the first few seasons.
Oh, that might be why I can't remember, because I didn't watch it for very long. A season or two. Yeah,
I don't remember the years that it ran. I know it ran for many years on Nickelodeon, but a lot more in reruns than original seasons. So I want to say maybe it was just the last season that she was on there, but just going back to what you're talking about, Pinwheel. I remember watching that the house, in the intro, and the other one that sticks out of my mind is the little, was he a snail or a turtle? The string puppet, on the show.
Oh, I don't even recall.
He had, I want to say he had glasses.
Oh, it was a turtle. I do remember it was a turtle.
Was it a turtle? Okay, those are the two images I think of when I think of Pinwheel. I think of the house in the intro, and that puppet, string puppet with the clear,
yeah,
trying to mask that it's a puppet.
The other thing I do remember,
uh-huh.
I do remember about Pinwheel that there was a game that the two, I guess, boys puppets would play. It was Get You Last. It wasn't tag. It was Got You Last. And that was the game. Yeah, I just remember that vaguely. Like they would smack each other. Got you last. Got you last. But anyway.
And yeah, Picture Pages, that was kind of like a filler almost. It wasn't like a full show, if I remember right.
No.
It was like maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and get out your page for today and let's see what the activity is. And yeah, I think every kid wanted that little pen that made the noise when he wrote. And darned if I remember if they ever sold it, or if you could like mail in to get it. I don't even remember how you got the Picture Pages.
I don't either.
To be honest, I think it was some kind of mail-in thing, or you had to call and order it. So I'm not sure if that even came with it, but that would be the only reason I would have wanted it, to have that pen to make the music, essentially, when Bill Cosby would write it on there. So that was always stuck out in my mind as early on. And yeah, you can't do that on television. Wow. That was like one of my favorite shows. Obviously I loved it. That's my little icon for Rediscover the 80s on social media for me. So much about that I loved. It was essentially the kids' version of Saturday Night Live almost, with all the little skits and the memorable characters. Barf, when they're at the kitchen. I think his name is Barth with a TH on the end, and he would always pop up. I heard that, and they would always do the little shooting squad, and he would ready, aim, and wait, stop the execution, and they would go into a little something. And of course the lockers, you remember them kind of poking their heads out of the lockers and telling jokes to each other, reminiscent of well, to me it's reminiscent of Hee Haw. If you ever watched Hee Haw, because my dad loved Hee Haw, and I
watched Hee Haw and loved it. I don't remember the locker gag though.
Well, they would, on Hee Haw, they would pop up from the cornfield and, hey, have you heard about the farmer who went down the road? And no, and they would tell a joke, and then somebody else would pop up from the cornfield. It was kind of like that, but they were coming through the lockers. They were all it's basically a rainbow set of lockers with all different colors, and you can't do that on television. Painted on there, and they would pop through the lockers and tell jokes to one another. And anyway, that was really fun. You remember at the beginning of every episode, they went through, and this is on YouTube. Somebody has put all these together, but they would say, they would come up with some fake name for a TV show, and this show will not be seen tonight to give you this stupid broadcast. It was like Reading Rambo will not be seen tonight. And they would go into the show that way. That was like their opening bumper for the show.
Right. I vaguely remember that, but I don't remember the different things. I know about Reading Rambo only because of your article, but I don't remember.
Yeah, well, once I found that on there, I had to put an article together on the best ones. There was all kinds of stuff. There's some on Knight Rider, and they were making fun of pretty much every show. Pee Wee Herman. That was really fun. And then, of course, yeah, you basically watched to wait for those 3 words, I don't know, and for the person to get slimed, you know. Oh, my gosh. Or water. Remember when they said water, too? They would dump the water on them.
No, I don't remember.
So it was either
that.
those. Oh, yeah, they did with water, too. So it was either the slime or the water they would get people with. And there was, I vaguely remember watching a documentary or something on, it might have been on YouTube, when they did a little mini reunion, and they, you know, told stories about how they made the slime, and how that was just such a big event that everybody kind of huddled around and waited for them to get slimed, you know.
Right.
I don't know. It was just a great show that I treasure a lot, remember a lot as a kid.
Right.
And I don't know, it being kids on there and acting, and you can kind of relate to, and some of the interaction with the adult character, he was kind of like the director on most of the skits, but he was doing Barth and the executioner guy, and he was everybody on that show. Really, really great show. And few episodes with my kids. They haven't been able to get into it, obviously, like I did as a kid. We've watched a few episodes from YouTube, but really wish they would get into that a little bit more.
I hear you.
Let's go. I'm going to jump into some of our Twitter feedback real quick, because what I asked was, what was the kind of first memories or shows you remember watching on Nickelodeon? At Larry Franks said, you can't do that on television, was so memorable. It shaped everything Nick became. That and Double Dare are Nickelodeon to me. So thank you, Larry Franks. I think he's one of your fellow Dukes fans, if I remember right. Big Dukes collector.
The Twitter feed sounds familiar. Yeah, he sounds familiar. I think so.
So thanks for giving your take on that, Larry. An account called at IQ, spelled AYEQUE, said Pinwheel. At Empathy Lewis said The World of David the Gnome, Eureka's Castle, and Muppet Babies. And then at FunPun32, Alvin and the Chipmunks, Muppet Babies, Doug, and Rugrats. So that was kind of strange to me, because I don't remember Muppet Babies being on Nickelodeon. I remember it being on like network TV, like Saturday mornings. So maybe it was running.
Right. It could have been a rerun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember David the Gnome?
Not at all.
That cartoon? You don't remember that cartoon?
No, I do not.
It was one they, I think, essentially imported before Nickelodeon developed their own animation studio, you know, like in the early 90s.
Right.
And it would run. I remember watching it. I don't know if I remember it being like I gotta go watch David the Gnome. It was just kind of, you turn on Nickelodeon, you see what's on, and it was there. I don't think it lasted very long, but it was like a lot of those early shows on Nickelodeon where it would run in reruns for up through like early 90s. Some of those at certain points of the day, or weekends, or marathons, or something like that. So and then I know the name Eureka's Castle, but I don't remember watching it. Do you remember Eureka's Castle?
Not at all. No.
I might have to look that up. I was thinking it was some kind of puppet show type thing. But anyway, and then we'll get into some of the 90s cartoons and stuff here in a minute. What other shows do you remember? I guess whether it be cartoons or live action or even game shows.
I do remember Double Dare, and I liked it. It was one of those where I had problems, a problem trying to watch it every time, so I didn't watch it consistently. But I loved it when I could watch it. It was always awesome to have them try to chase down that flag at the very end and then get slimed or do something stupid. You know,
all the physical challenges.
Right.
It was a nice mix because I love trivia. So, you know, they're doing the trivia at the beginning and then, you know, the slime and the physical challenges and the wacky stuff that he just did on that stage. Oh man, it was so much fun to watch.
Oh yeah.
And the grand prize, it was one of the classic grand prizes on those kids game shows. You know, remember what they always did at the end? A trip to space camp. Yeah.
Yes, I do remember that. Yeah.
That was always one of the, you know, if they completed that whole obstacle course at the end, the last one was trip to space camp. I remember thinking that, you know, space camp was like heaven on earth.
Yep.
Never visited, never had the opportunity. I'm actually closer to it now. And
I would think so.
One of my sons has actually been to the facility there, not to the actual camp, but you know, all the NASA and astronaut rocket stuff there in Huntsville. They visited there, but I have yet to go there myself to check it all out. I wonder if they do like an adult space camp.
Well, maybe if you fit in a little geo, maybe fit in a little geo, whatever they all call it, that spins you around. You're supposed to try to level yourself out.
Right, right. Yeah. How many G's can you take before passing out? Yeah. Anyway, what else do you remember? Besides Double Dare,
I really enjoyed Mr. Wizard's World. I loved what he did. I loved his explanations of stuff. I still, to this day, remember the one trick that still astounded me. It was like a magic trick, and he said it was nothing magic, nothing, you know, he was just explaining it.
Mm-hmm.
You put some kind of powder. I want to say it was not talcum powder. It was something else. He had the fish aquarium, and he poured this on there, and he says, I'm going to show you that you can catch this bolt or grab this bolt without getting your hand wet. And he did put a lot of it, and essentially it molded the water tension around the kid's hand. And I still remember him grabbing the bolt, pulling it out, and his hand was completely dry. It was covered in powder, but it was completely dry. I remember another explanation of how when you're moving, you think that, like if you're bouncing a ball and you're riding a bike, how you as the rider think that the ball is just going straight up and down.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, obviously, it's being moved forward, so it's going through that. So he was explaining that. The final thing that I still remember on that episode is how he's explaining the muscles in your body inside, how they basically push your food down to your stomach.
They had the kid
stand on their head.
Yes, by the refrigerator. I remember that.
Yep, and it was like an apple or something. Take a bite of this apple, and then he explains it. And I think it was a girl, because I still remember something. Me and my mind at the time going, "You got to be careful where you're pointing there, Mr. Wizard," because it was just funny.
That's funny. I can remember that, but yeah. Gosh, I love Mr. Wizard's World. I remember watching it all the way up through like my early high school years in the early 90s. It was in the morning time before I went to school. So if I got up and ate breakfast and got ready, I had time to watch Mr. Wizard before going to school, which is kind of, I don't know if that's counterintuitive, but I loved it. It was like, it was almost like Mr. Rogers, but cooler. You know, he
Yeah,
invited the kids essentially over. It was like over to his house to do all these experiments and stuff. And oh yeah, he loved the flash paper. I remember that. He loved to use that
I
flash
missed that one,
paper,
I guess.
and it's that almost like tissue paper that you put it over a candle or something, and just woof, you know, and it would disappear, no ash or anything. He loved using that stuff in experiments. And there was one, I don't know, sticks out in my mind where this girl kind of jumps back and is afraid of the thing, you know, and a lot of that stuff he did was, you know, it was surprising type of stuff. So it wasn't like it was dangerous or anything. And he always had got to have your safety goggles on for whatever. But oh yeah, I love that show. I remember it being some of my early introduction to computing, and having, you know, one of those old computers with the black and the green lettering, black screen and green lettering. And he was what was it? He was doing a math problem or some kind of program on there, and kids were trying to get the answer to it, and he was messing with them because it's a computer, and the computer always knows what's going on when it's, you know, within the program. And they were surprised that it could essentially pick their number or something like that. But oh man, there's so much stuff on that show, I remember. And it was just so much fun. Like I said, it was like Mr. Rogers, but 12 times as cooler, because he had all this cool stuff in his house that you could fool with, you know, the lab stuff. But yeah, love Mr. Wizard's World. What else you remember?
That, I guess I'll call it during the daytime. That's all I really remember. I do remember getting more 90s. I do remember Ren and Stimpy, because that was one of your favorite shows. I don't remember. I mean, I know of them because they would be on like a TV in a doctor's lounge or something. I remember seeing like Blue's Clues and maybe SpongeBob and all that, but I never physically got into those shows. I know friends of mine have, and you know, good on them. But me myself, I just never. Now, Dennis the Menace, I do remember getting into for a short time. I don't think I stayed consistent with it, so I don't remember too much.
On Nick at Night, you mean, or was that during the day?
I remember watching it. I just don't remember. I don't remember what side of it. But the Dennis the Menace.
You're talking about the original show?
No, it'd be the cartoon that I'd watched, but that might have been actually on. That could have been on network TV as well. I don't.
Okay. Well, a few more I remember. Early Nickelodeon watching. There was a show called Out of Control, and it starred Dave Coulier, who was Uncle what's his face on Full House. Joey.
Uncle Jesse? Oh, Joey.
Uncle Joey. He hosted the show. It was kind of like it was kind of like skit comedy. I believe, like you can't do that on television, but I don't know. There were some other parts to it. I want to say there was some kind of news, faux news room type thing, and he'd always do the cut it out, you know. And I've got a few memories of watching Out of Control. Love some of the early game shows. Obviously, Double Dare we talked about. You remember Finders Keepers?
No, I do not.
Oh my gosh, dude. Okay, so Finders Keepers was basically two teams of, I think, two kids. And at the beginning, they gave you like a screen. It was almost like a telestrator, you know, an old school telestrator back in the day. And they gave you one of those hidden pictures, and they gave you clues, and you had to circle where stuff was hidden on this picture, and you earned points or something. And you earned the right to search so many rooms in this house. and there's this huge set. It was like a 2-story set of different rooms, room and the bathroom and the kitchen, and they also had every once in a while weird rooms like the dungeon and the Frankenstein's laboratory and King Tut's tomb and stuff like that. And you went after you did your little thing with the telestrator and earned the right to go in the rooms. You went and they gave you a clue and you had to search and you had to find something. And it was usually something that wasn't like a flag. It was like an object that essentially shouldn't be there. And they gave you a clue, and there's kids, you know, they're like reaching in. If they're in the bathroom, you're like reaching into the toilet, and you're the bathtub was full of foam stuff, and you're reaching through that, and you're digging through. It was just like the ultimate kid's dream of just tearing a house apart, you know, and not caring. You could just rip everything open and search for these little things, and at the end of the game, you did like a lightning round where you started in one room and then they gave you a clue. If you found it, it gave you the next room to go to, and you'd run to the next room and you try to find this, and you had to find so many things in like 60 seconds or something. Oh man, that was just such a fun game show to watch, and never had the notion to do it at home, but probably would have gotten in deep trouble had I played Finders Keepers at home. But I want to say it had some kind of home game. You remember a lot of these early shows like Double Dare. It had like the consolation prize is the Double Dare home game, you know. And I never had
I do.
Never had anything like that was like the home version. Mainly probably because, you know, if my mom saw that and was Christmas shopping or something, she's like, yeah, I don't want to clean up a mess. So I'm not going to get the home game for Double Dare, but loved Finders Keepers. I had this section of life after I moved from Kerwinsville down to Clearfield. This would have been like early high school years, where I watched a ton of in the afternoon after school. And it was usually over at my Gram's house if she was picking me up from school or watching me until mom got off of work or whatever. Several game shows. One I remember watching was called Make the Grade, and it was kind of a kids version of Jeopardy. And you had categories on this board of like kindergarten through 12th grade, I think it was. And you're trying to, if my memory serves me correctly, you're trying to put your color. There was like three kids that were participating. They each had their own like red, green, blue, whatever it was. And you're trying to put your color and make like connect 4 or 5. I can't remember what it was in a row in these categories. And it was like history and science and math and, you know,
that vaguely sounds familiar, but I don't remember this.
Higher the grade level, the harder the question, that kind of thing. Oh man, I love, and see, I got a full dose of Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy every night thanks to my uncle. So I kind of got into those shows, and that translated into watching shows like this, like Make the Grade and like Double Dare that had trivia, you know, that kind of a thing. So I love that show. I remember, do you remember Nick Arcade? No. Nick Arcade was a game show that essentially put you inside a video game. This was like the end bonus game or whatever at the end of the show. Excuse me. You'd start out and I want to say it was like trivia or something, but you had this board and it was like a virtual game board, and you had this guy. I want to say his name was Mikey. I could be wrong, but you basically told the host, "I'm going to go up or left or right," and the little guy would move on there, and you would have a question pop up or a prize or something, and you'd make your way around the board. And I can't remember how you won the game, if it was, you know, the most points or something. And at the end of the game, it was like it was almost like you know how like weathermen use a green screen to do the weather on the local news. It was like that, but you're inside like a video game, and they had like coins that you had to grab or something. And oh, it just looked hard. It looked like, and I don't remember anybody ever like winning the grand prize at the end. But it it looked fun. I mean, it literally puts you inside a game. But you saw the kids like trying to reach up and try to get this thing, and there was little things shooting at you. I'm sure it was just hard as heck to actually do this from like a green screen, and you know, as you're in this game. Remember watching that? That was very entertaining. The other one that I'm really I really loved, and I'm excited that they are somewhat bringing it back, is Legends of the Hidden Temple. Now tell me you watched that game. Did you ever watch Legends of the Hidden Temple?
I can't recall ever seeing that. Sorry.
Oh man, man, that was another. It was another game show. It was more of a physical type game show. They had like several teams. I think it was like maybe 6 or 8 teams to start, and they would whittle it down after all these challenges. And the first one was pretty quick, and they did one challenge to start to narrow it down by 2 teams, and then you went up to the I think it's the Steps of Knowledge, and they basically told you a story. The statue Olmec, he told you a story, and you had to remember what he was talking about during the story, and you worked your way down the steps, and you got down to I think 2 teams at that point, and then there was one last little challenge. And then the winner of that got to go into the temple. And the temple was kind of Finders Keepers, where it was like a 2-story set with multiple rooms and multiple things to do in each room. There was some you had to crawl through, and there was like a throne room you had to sit on and find. You're trying to find the doorway to get to some object in there, grab it, and get out. But there's these temple guards that would be hidden in there, and you had like a medallion or something that you could give them to basically get an extra life, you know, that you earned throughout the game.
Right.
And oh man, it was just so much fun. And I ended up showing several of those shows from YouTube to my boys, and we got into that for a while. And when we finally got to an episode where they actually won at the end, because that was another one that was really, really hard. We were like cheering like fools that they won the prize at the end, because it was so difficult. And they're actually bringing it back into a movie, TV movie, pretty soon. I want to say it's coming up in the next few months. Can't remember off the top of my head, but I've seen the trailers. It looks really fun. It looks like maybe something that the people who actually remember watching it will get a kick out of seeing, because there's a lot of little throwbacks to the actual game. And the original host is back, and the statue, and the guy who did the voice for Olmec, he's coming back. Really cool. I know Nick is doing a lot of reboots or long anticipated sequels to some of its cartoons and shows like that, adaptations. So that was a really cool one, man. I can't believe you didn't get to watch that one, but this is getting into our high school years, so we're not watching too much kind of kids programming anymore. And
no, and saying that, if that's when this was coming out, that's when I moved out to my stepdad's house. We didn't have cable then. We actually had a satellite dish, and I'm talking the big, like, I guess they're called the 12-meter dishes, where they're freaking, or 3-meter dishes, where they're 12 foot high. And I thought it was always cool having one of those, because at that time you could not find the NASA channel on your local cable TV. So I thought it was always cool. I could sit there and watch a satellite, looking down at the Earth or something. But anyway, I don't remember looking or watching a lot of uh, Nickelodeon after I moved because of just the whole dynamics of where we were.
Gotcha. Yeah, I guess like you mentioned before, Ren and Stimpy was a bit of an anomaly because I a lot of those early Nick cartoons miss me, like Doug, like the Rugrats. What else? The Wild Thornberries. The those early ones that once they got into the animation business in the early '90s. I was in high school, so I kind of moved past a lot of the newer cartoons, except for Ren and Stimpy somehow. I'm not sure how I got onto them. I just this past week decided to do a free trial on Hulu, and a lot of these Nick shows are on there, including Ren and Stimpy. So that was like the first thing that I watched on Hulu was the first episode of Ren and Stimpy, and oh my gosh, the memories that flooded back. It was like I could almost anticipate what was going to happen and what was coming out of the next character's mouth, and it was kind of a weird experience. But I love me some Ren and Stimpy. I don't know, just a weird show, Powdered Toast Man, and just the way Ren talked, was, Stimpy, you idiot. He would, slap him around, and it was a little bit of Three Stooges in there,
Right.
And just the weirdness of it, their eyeballs bulging out of their heads, and Stimpy chewing on the kitty litter, that kind of a thing. It was just out there. It was just different, and it drew me in. It was about the same time I want to say that I started watching Beavis and Butthead. It was just kind of one of those things that you hadn't seen before. It was just weird and different, and a lot of people in a lot of different demographics watched Ren and Stimpy and even Beavis and Butthead on MTV. But that, that was, I guess, about the time when I started watching Nick at Nite too. And we had talked a little bit about this in some of our previous podcasts, but I don't know. There must be some kind of stage in life where you want to take a step back beyond what you remember and essentially sit there for a while and see what people watch, what people listen to, kind of a thing. And that might have been just my thoughts around Nick at Nite and why I wanted to watch some of these shows. I don't know what kind of drew you into Nick at Nite. Was it a particular show, or was it just more of a, let me see what happened in the 70s and 60s and even 50s?
I would call it neither, because it was typically what was on, just what was ever on, flipping through the channels at night. I remember watching Green Acres with my dad. I don't remember much of the episodes as far as details, but I do remember watching it. And then him saying, "Oh, I remember watching this," and he never put too much. He wasn't like me, and probably you, in that, oh man, I grew up watching this, or I did this, that. It was more of, hey, this is what I watched. Okay, so it was like you either liked it or you didn't. There was no real in between. But what I did like, believe it or not, and we talked about this as well in our in the car, in that being that I would sometimes had an infatuation with girls, and that's why I would watch or listen to music because of them, because they looked. And I would watch the Patty Duke show because she looked pretty cute, and then I figured out how old she was. But
that kind of ruined it for you, huh?
Well, I didn't ruin it, but it's like, oh man, really?
About 20 years too late. Yeah,
about 20-ish, and ish. No, but I still liked it. It was still a fun show. My Three Sons was very interesting. I wasn't the steady patron of it, but I loved it whenever it was on. Mr. Ed, that's the other one that used to be on. I did love watching it. And
Mr. Ed was kind of that, almost one of those train wreck shows where you couldn't look away. It was like, really, this was popular. The people watched this.
yeah,
Oh my gosh, this is kind of funny. You know,
it was kind of like that. Yes, very much like that.
Wilbur.
Oh man, and where that goes. So yeah, I remember watching it. I remember watching. I'm not sure. I'm not 100%. This is where I started watching it.
Mm-hmm.
However, I do remember the Munsters.
Yes.
That's one of my classic. I remember actually watching that like as often as I could. It was like watching the original Batman series. That was one of those you had to watch. The other ones you could pass by. Munsters was one of those that
Yeah.
I loved. Just, and I'm surprised my dad never said anything about it, because as conservative as he was in that mindset, he wasn't a fan of monsters and stuff. But I guess he allowed it because it was more of a comic hour, rather than
Yeah.
anything
It
else.
was a family show.
It was. It really was.
And they made fun of the horror kind of a thing.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember if that was actually on Nick at Night or if that was like a WPIX show, because I remember watching The Honeymooners on WPIX occasionally.
That's probably where it was then.
And that was, I want to say, late at night. But yeah, I love the Munsters too. Yeah, Mr. Ed, Green Acres. I was thinking that this is where I watched Dennis the Menace too, the original show. I watched a lot of that show. I don't know what about him. It just, always getting into mischief and that kind of a thing. A big one for me was Get Smart.
Yes.
I watched a lot of Get Smart. I want to say I even filled up a VHS tape of nothing but Get Smart episodes at one point, because I was really into that. And I don't know. It was, I've always liked James Bond, and that was, that was more Inspector Gadget, which,
Right.
he was the one that actually did the voice. But it was just that kind of bumbling and stumbling into things. And I don't know. It was another one of those just funny shows, and had the funny little gadgets, the shoe phone, and, stuff like that. Loved watching Get Smart. One I remember, this is an oddball, and I'm not sure you'll remember this. And it came on always late. I remember that because when it was on, I'm watching, I was just hilariously laughing, just that this show existed. It was called Lancelot Link, Secret Chimp. Do you remember that show?
No, I
Or do you
do
remember
not.
watching that? Lancelot Link, Secret Chimp. It was these monkeys. I guess I don't know what type of monkeys they would have been, but your basic kind of monkey that they would put in a show and get to move his mouth. And well, it was just basically all these monkeys that they would dress up, and he was like a secret agent, I think, and they would it was just the craziest thing. And I'm it's 11, 12 o'clock at night, this comes on, and you're, I don't know, 14, 15 years old. This is like the most insane thing you've ever seen ever. And I just remember dying laughing at watching this thing, and these chimps that they got, chimpanzees, where they were, they tortured with putting on these crazy costumes and getting them to move their mouth, and somebody dubbing obviously the words.
Right.
Craziest show. I wonder if anybody else will remember that one. But man, it was that was really a one of those crazy Nick at Night shows. Any other ones from Nick at Night you remember watching?
There was one, I don't know if it was really Nick at Night. I think it was on the borderline. It was called Hey Dude.
Oh yes, that was a Nickelodeon. Yes, it was. I want to say it was an afternoon show.
That's what I thought it was. I don't think it was quite Nick at Night.
It was around that time of, remember Pete and Pete? And
No.
oh, there was another show around that time that was like a teen. It was almost like, if I remember it correctly, it was almost like Saved by the Bell, but on a dude ranch. You know, it had the
kind of, yeah, it had that feel for
teenage actors, that kind of a thing, and put a story together. But yeah, I do remember Hey Dude. That was probably mid 90s, I would say. So that had to have been around about the time we were graduating high school.
Yeah. I watched it because of the cute girl that was on it. But I do remember it was actually fun. It was actually fun. I usually got into stuff after watching. A great example would be, I probably get the bad looks from listeners now. Would be, what was the show? Oh, My Two Dads.
Oh yeah, you were well into the what's her face, Stacy
Keenan, and
oh my gosh,
I was very infatuated with her. And if I weren't married, I'd probably still be infatuated with her. But no, it was kind of on that same lines where I just watched it, and then I started really getting into it. Watching Paul Reiser, and I'm trying to think of the other guy's name. The comedy was hilarious. I'm like, okay, Stacy, you're great, but this is actually a pretty cool show. And it was actually the same with Step by Step, because I followed her in her career, I'll call it, again because of the interest, and it was funny to watch that whole kind of modern is relative now, 90s take at like a Brady Bunch type of thing.
Yeah,
and that was actually fun. Cody was hilarious in that as a character, but anyway, like that aside, I mean, it was just that.
Yeah,
I got caught. I got drawn into it for one reason, and actually liked the show afterwards anyway. So, and that was the same with like Hey Dude and Patty Duke and those type of shows. Oddly enough, I was never drawn to monsters. I wasn't drawn to Marilyn. Never drawn to her. I liked actually seeing.
Well, she was in black and white.
She was.
I guess Patty Duke would have been too.
She was in black and white too. That didn't deter. Except until I learned how old black and white she was. But
yeah, that was never a deterrent for me either, as far as the black and white versus color. And it's weird now, some of the movies that they colorized. One of them.
Well, even the Monsters was colorized.
Well, that's right. That was just, I don't know. It's just weird when they do things like that, to see them in color.
It is, and I'm sure we could go on a whole. This might actually take up one of our topics, but very briefly, the Three Stooges were colorized a few years ago. Back again when the DVD craze was kind of hitting headstrong, and I bought a DVD with them colorized, and it was hard. I won't deny it was hard to see them in color, but it was also like, man, you can see the actual you see some things a little clearer, not always, but a little bit clearer on what they were doing. And I couldn't help but think, how do they know that's, Curly was wearing a green suit, or whatever, whatever it was. And here, going through my broadcast school that I went through here about 2 years ago, it's actually a lot easier technically, with the systems. It's a lot easier than one might think. I didn't realize how easy it was for the systems to recognize what hues meant what color and translated it as such. So it was a lot easier of whomever did it, basically used the systems to their advantage and went, yep, Curly was wearing a green suit. I'm like, really? They had green suits back then? But it was actually fun to watch. I guess I'm jaded. I still like the black and white just for the whole nostalgia of it.
Yeah, well, it's just what you're used to seeing them in too.
But it was nice to see, getting back on our topic, like the monsters. It was nice to see how the characters were really make-upped. You know, you saw Lily was actually green, so well, basically most of them were green, except for Grandpa, which was odd. You know, you'd think Grandpa was green, but he was more like a whitish, pale type. In theory, he was supposed to be dead for 100,000 years or whatever, but and that
pale. Yeah.
Right, and that whole I still love that staircase where it opened up for their little dragon pet thing.
Oh yeah, Spot.
Yeah,
right?
that was Spot. And I still want one. That I want one of those if I am ever lucky enough to have a little bit bigger house. That's the way that I want to go to my basement. I want to be able to do that. And
With a staircase.
Jeff Dunham actually built one. Well, I don't think he built it or bought that specific one from the show, but he did a kind of a Halloween style DVD, and I have it. I can't remember the name of it. I think I can't remember, but anyway, he actually comes out of the staircase, the monster staircase, like that with Walter. It was awesome.
Oh, wow.
It was so awesome to see that. I'm like, dude, you have money. I want one of those.
Yeah, cool. That would be crazy to have in your house.
I want all the secret pockets in my house. I want to be able to pull up a board and it'd be like a handgun. Another board might be my cash stash or whatever.
I'm telling you, man, you need to go watch The Ghost of Mr. Chicken. There's a lot of secret passages and stuff.
I do
in that movie.
Eons and eons ago. I say eons. About 10 years ago, I had actually
watch it again.
I drafted a on actual like graph paper, drew up an idea of how to design my house, and I had secret passages all over that house. And I used to joke that that house would cost me $1 million to build and probably only be worth, 300,000 face value. I'm like, that'd be me. I'd be doing something like that. But hey, at least I can escape to an escape room.
True. I guess kind of as to kind of end the topic on Nickelodeon, because obviously Nickelodeon still is putting out programming today. Is there any that you've either passed along, or are there any like newer shows that your kids have taken to from Nickelodeon?
A lot. Adam has really we were actually introduced to this because we don't actually have Nickelodeon, believe it or not. We have the very basic cable, and oddly enough, they give us Disney Junior, but they won't give us freaking Nickelodeon. Yeah, it's weird. But anyway, we have he really likes Blaze and the Monster Machines. What's the other one? Man, I know it's a Disney one, but it's not that. That'll come to me, I'm sure. But he's into another show that was on Nick, but he's not into anything old retro. I think Julie has something to do with that, but yeah, she's not into old stuff. All the time she's commenting when we go back and forth on Facebook, you old farts, or something like that. But which is often.
Yeah, I've tried to get my boys into some of these shows. Like I said, some of them will take. Legends of the Hidden Temple, we got into that for maybe a few weeks and watched several episodes of that, and they were into that kind of a thing. But none that I have passed along from Nickelodeon. We haven't had cable in quite a while. We got rid of cable essentially when we moved here, and so we haven't got a lot of those broadcast shows on Nickelodeon, and have had to either do DVDs or the streaming through Netflix and such. they've watched some of the shows. Shortly after we moved here, I bought a DVD set of Blue's Clues. They watched a lot of that. A lot of these I had to kind of grin and bear it, once they get into the show, they have to watch it over and over and over again. But anyway,
and again.
So yeah, and again. So Blue's Clues was one I had to bear for a while. We did get into Dora for a while. I'm glad
that's the one he was into. He was into that, and it faded.
Dora and what was her? Is it her cousin or brother? Diego. Anyway, that show she just seems to scream, or she talks like really loud in like normal conversation. It always drove me crazy. Never got into SpongeBob. My wife and I don't know. It was SpongeBob I view as almost the modern day Ren and Stimpy for some of the shock effect and just different styles of animation that they put into that show. I don't know. That kind of deterred us from the boys really watching a lot of that. And like I said, we don't have cable, so they haven't consumed a lot of SpongeBob. Some of these are, at the Burger King Playland when they're not up in the Playland and they're watching TV. They'll have like Nickelodeon or something on. And then one that I loathed for a long, long time that I think it was Jameson that was into it was the Wonder Pets. Oh my gosh, I wanted just to shoot myself every time that show came on. And he loved it. And it was a duck and a mouse and something else, and they would go off and save other animals. Gosh, I'm not even going to go into the song. So that one was like, oh, Nickelodeon, you suck. But I know there's been a lot of shows now. I think they're still going with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's been pretty popular the way they brought those back into that new series. I remember seeing a story that they brought back the original voice actors and did some kind of time warp episode where they had like the 1980s Turtles and they used the original voice actors versus the new Turtles, or maybe they teamed up. I can't remember because I've never seen it, but that was one I noticed was on Hulu. And I was like, ooh, we might have to start watching this. So there's some shows like that Nickelodeon has taken over and really, really ran with and have been pretty popular. So, again, for the most part, they've been missed just because, it's the kids type shows that are repetitive and make parents want to, go on a cruise for 3 weeks and duct tape your kids to the wall. But there are some other shows that they've done a really good job with, and I think for the most part, people would agree that the Ninja Turtles are one that they've really excelled with taking over. So that's I guess that's Nickelodeon to us. Anything else you wanted to put in there?
No, I think we covered
that
it.
We might have missed
quite well. No, I think you actually got it all.
Okay.
Yeah, this is actually fun. Obviously, Memory Jogger and anything we do podcast is always fun to do. But this is, like we said, Nickelodeon was probably one of our first cable networks that we remember watching with so much that was there with, starting with, I'll call it Pinwheel as the beginning and just moving on to Ren and Stimpy and then Nick at Night.
Yeah.
This was an awesome trip down memory lane, trying to remember what we watched, the little scenes, like we talked about, Mr. Wizard. Oh, I forgot about this or
Yeah.
whatever. This is awesome, and we hope that you guys, as the listeners, were able to jog your memories, whether it was with some of the episodes, TV shows that we remember, or maybe this jogged your memory to remember another show that we didn't account for. So,
yeah, there's just so many. It's hard to put in one podcast all of Nickelodeon, but yeah, it was aimed towards that era where, yeah, our time to watch TV was Saturday morning and then noon, and Nickelodeon, besides maybe like PBS, which they showed Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street and such, Reading Rainbow during the week, but Nickelodeon was like 24/7, man. And well, up until even with Nick at Night, we were watching it, but
right,
it was just something you could turn on, and it was just like geared towards kids, geared towards us. And if you needed a break from the A-Team, or if you needed a break from watching He-Man or G.I. Joe or Transformers in the afternoon, you knew it was always there, and
right.
you could always check it out and see what they were doing. So yeah, it was a big part of our TV watching, and I want to get a little bit more into kind of as kids, and maybe even a little later on, shows that we would sit down and fill up a whole VHS tape of 8 hours or 6 hours, because we loved it so much and we wanted to go back to it when it wasn't on, or just watch marathons of it. Because I know I still have some of my old VHS tapes full of shows, and I was thinking maybe what we could do. I don't know if you have some as well. We could just go digging in our garage or where our storage, and see what we can find, and see what VHS tapes we can find that either we tape from TV, movies or shows. See what we remember watching the most, or just rare stuff that I've got VHS tapes of like basketball bloopers and stuff, just weird stuff like that that we would record off TV. I want to kind of explore that a little more on this podcast. So Nickelodeon was part of that, but it was still a small part when you think of the scope of even the early days of cable.
Right.
A lot of stuff there. So, well, you want to talk about the next show?
Yeah.
Well, I guess before I spew what I was going to spew about the topic for the next show. I know Christmas is coming up, but what was some of the other things maybe you wanted to get into as far as this podcast goes? Anything that was on your mind? Do you have anything specific?
Really, are you actually trying to jab me to say something? Because I'm not.
No. I was just trying to think if there was something, because we've written down a lot of ideas, but I didn't know if there was something at the forefront of your mind. Oh, I want to get to this next, or I want to tap into something.
There's so much. Jason and I have a laundry list, is probably the best way to put it, of topics that we keep going with, or we keep building rather. And I think you hit on one that I was actually just thinking about somewhat in a different realm.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, like you said, what did we used to tape? What do we have most of? And it could actually spew into two podcasts, really, because we could go through the just the VHSs that we filled up, that were typically filled up with a particular show, or mostly of 2 or 3 types of shows, that could turn into a second podcast where, okay, what else do you still have on VHS? Was it a hodgepodge of shows? Was it, did you tape 2 episodes of Knight Rider, and then now it's the Stooges, and now it's so and so, kind of that kind of realm.
Yeah.
It could still all fit in one podcast. I think that's a good, actually a very good transition to go into. I know the holiday season is coming up. I'm hoping that we can churn this episode out in the next week or two, and then maybe that same week, if we're up for it, we can churn out a Christmas one as well.
Well, I was invited, but I'm going to include you because obviously you're part of the show and of Rediscover the 80s. But Dave from the 80s Reboot, I think it's 80s Reboot Overdrive. He does, there's several podcasts, and they have a blog, and they've done, I think, 2 events up to this point that was a collaboration of several blogs and podcasts. The last one they just did was on 80s cars. I was like, oh man, if they had only talked to us,
right,
a little bit sooner, we could have come up with something. But it was really fun enjoying listening. They did kind of a draft, and they were like, all right, what's your favorite 80s cars? And it was interesting, some of the ones that they picked. It wouldn't have been the ones that we picked. Because some of their the hosts on their show are just a little bit older than us, so they were more into the high school years and probably even early college years in the 80s, which gives another unique perspective from us who were kids in the 80s, right. Younger kids. But anyway, so he reached out to me, and he says they want to do a Christmas collaboration. And they want to talk about, it was kind of a basic headline that you could take whatever way you wanted to go with it. It was, what were the top 80s Christmas gifts? And you could take that as, okay, well, what was the ultimate gifts? Like the G.I. Joe USS Flag, that was like the holy grail for a lot of kids back then, or whatever. That kind of a thing. Or it could be the top gifts that we received. And that's the kind of way I wanted to go with this Christmas episode, because there's going to be several aspects of Christmas, the Christmas specials we watched, and maybe some experiences with family, that sort of thing. And we can go into that a little bit. But what I wanted to try to come up with was maybe, I think they suggested the top 3 gifts that you received, you remember getting on Christmas in the 80s. I've got several. I got some that I still have that I would love to talk about. So what do you think about that? You got enough memory on some of the gifts that you received at Christmas
I believe
do a
so.
podcast? Okay. So that's what I wanted to do as a part. I want to do an actual article on the website, and both of us can kind of participate there, put up our top 3 there, but also come back here on Memory Jogger, talk a little bit more in depth about those, and maybe a few others if we remember, and just kind of go tackle Christmas that way as a kid in the 80s, and some of the things that maybe some of the things we might have earmarked in the Sears wish book, or some of the things we actually were surprised to get, or weird things that maybe they don't make anymore, a Walkman or whatever. I don't know. I just thought that would be a fun way to tackle a Christmas episode, and then also collaborate with our newfound 80s friends. So what do you think about that? And I'll still let you pick beyond that if you want to, if you don't want to go this VHS route, because I'll owe you one beyond that. But I thought this was a unique opportunity to do this, and it's all going to take place. I think the launch day for everybody to get their stuff posted and uploaded is December 13th. So we've got a couple weeks yet before the official launch date, and we're gonna kind of tout it on our social media and stuff. But I think that gives us enough time to jump back on the air here soon and do a Christmas show.
Sounds good.
So cool. Okay, well, I'm glad you're on board with that. I didn't want to necessarily cram it on you, but
no, this actually works out.
I just thought it would fit this show perfectly.
Yes, it would.
Awesome. Okay. Well, if you're good on that, then after Christmas we can dive into to something your pick. Maybe I'll just shut up for a while and let you brainstorm.
Well, I'm always brainstorming. If you look at Jason and I have a Google Docs, and it continues to grow. And quite often, I find myself doing in the middle of a project, which I'm already distracted enough when I'm doing projects, and I'll come up with, "Oh, we should talk about this." Oh, and I think I've described.
Write it down.
Well, I describe it probably more often in the Agents of Mask podcast. Is I will text it to myself as an email, so that I will remember to put it on this growing, basically topic list of what to do. So I think we are set for topics for at least the next year, possibly two.
Okay.
But, you as a listener, if there's something you can think of that it would be interesting to listen to, please let us know, and we will actually add it. We'll add it to the list. I won't promise that it'll be the next episode. I'll be honest, but we seem to try on our zillion bunny trails. We seem to be able to grab something from the current episode to go to the next one. So that was why I was thinking of doing the VHS type episode. But that's fine because December is here.
Yeah.
So it works out well to do a Christmas type episode of Memory Jogger. So I'm looking forward to that. And I know you're more than eager to jump on that. Yes. In fact, I am too, but there's so much Christmas ideas in my head. I think it would be too much.
Well, and if we make it a year and we coming back around to, Halloween again and Thanksgiving, Christmas, I'm sure we'll be able to come up with some other stuff wrapped around those holidays that we can talk about. Oh, yeah. So it's not like we have to cram everything into this is going to be our Christmas show. We got to talk about everything Christmas just during this show. So, we can tap into something next year or later down the road if we want to. But yeah, I would love to get some suggestions on topic ideas. And again, we're not trying to necessarily pick apart a certain franchise or one certain movie or show. We're trying to wrap this around from our perspective in growing up and how that relates to some of these like Nickelodeon. We're not trying to go through the history of Nickelodeon. We're definitely going to miss some stuff in between because some stuff missed us that you might have experienced. So we would love to get some ideas for new shows, and then of course hit those show notes when we post them on rediscoverthe80s.com. Put in the comments, your memories on Nickelodeon, for instance, when we post this episode, and we'll try to read those back. And I love getting different perspectives on this. And that was another reason why I jumped at the chance to collaborate with some of these other 80s bloggers, because they're just a slightly older gives you a whole new perspective. Like we had in the early 90s, we're in high school, and we kind of missed that mid to late 90s culture music, cartoons, and anything like that came out in those years. Of course, you were in the military. I was at college, so just 5 years difference can make a world of difference in perspective. So that's what I'm eager to interact with some other people on the same material, basically. So anyway, I've talked enough. I think we've talked enough on this show, and I think we should go ahead and take us home. And we'll be looking forward to talking about some Christmas gifts that we got as kids in the 80s.
Right. And with that, we close by really just thanking you once again to all the Memory Jogger listeners and those that are, talking to us via social media. Awesome. Please continue to send us your notes, your comments, your memories, and we'll do our best to put it on the air. We usually read out everybody's, so please share that with us. Again, thank you for listening. We invite you again to join us next time as we run down Memory Jogger.